In the heart of the village of Havenwood, nestled by a winding creek and cradled by rolling green hills, lived a young girl named Clara. She shared a small, cozy home with her grandmother, a woman whose every wrinkle held a story and whose voice was a melody of forgotten worlds. Clara's grandmother was more than just a storyteller. She was the village's heart. Her tales of brave knights, cunning sprites, and ancient forests were the glue that held Havenwood together. The villagers would gather every evening under the old oak tree, listening in rapt silence as her words painted vibrant pictures in their minds. But now, the oak tree stood silent. The grandmother had passed away 3 months ago, and with her, the magic had gone out of Havenwood. Clara felt her loss more than anyone. The house, once filled with laughter and the steady tick-tock of a grandfather clock, now felt hollow. The clock had stopped on the day of her grandmother's passing, a silent testament to the void left behind. Clara avoided her grandmother's room, a sanctuary of stories and warmth. The scent of old books and dried lavender, her grandmother's favorites, was too painful to bear. The villagers, too, were adrift. Their evenings were no longer spent in joyful communion but in quiet, separate sadness. One stormy afternoon, as rain lashed against the windows, Clara decided she could not live with the emptiness any longer. She resolved to face her grief head-on by cleaning her grandmother's room. Stepping inside, she was overwhelmed by the memories. She ran her hand over a stack of worn-out books, a small wooden horse carved by her grandfather, and the quilt her grandmother had mended 1,000 times. The room was not a tomb of memories, but a treasure chest. In the far corner, beneath an old wool shawl, sat a large, wooden trunk. This trunk was different. Her grandmother had always kept it locked, and had never spoken of its contents. Clara, driven by a sudden curiosity, knelt before it. Inside, nestled among moth-eaten silks and pressed wildflowers, was a book. It was bound in dark, supple leather that felt ancient to the touch. The book had no title, no author's name, only a strange, swirling symbol on its cover that seemed to shift in the faint light. It was held shut by a magnificent golden padlock, shaped like a miniature sun with 7 radiating rays. Clara rummaged through a box of her grandmother's old keys, searching for one that might fit the intricate lock. She found a single, tarnished key hanging on a silk thread, its head a perfect match for the sun-shaped padlock. As she inserted the key and turned it, a soft, golden light pulsed from the book. The padlock melted into a shimmering liquid, and the book sprang open. The pages within were completely blank. Clara's initial excitement gave way to a wave of disappointment. It was just an old, empty journal. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. Just as she was about to close it, a faint shimmer appeared on the first page. A thin, elegant line began to form, swirling into a single, beautiful word, hello. As the word materialized, a puff of sparkling smoke burst from the book. From the smoke emerged a small, mischievous figure. He had a long, pointy nose, ears that wiggled with a life of their own, and eyes that sparkled with unbridled mischief. He wore a tiny waistcoat and a small bowler hat, and he seemed to be made of starlight and pure chaos. "Pip is my name," he announced, his voice a high, tinkling sound, "and I am a sprite, a storyteller sprite. I grant wishes, but only through the stories you write." Clara was stunned, speechless. She had heard of sprites in her grandmother's tales, but she had never believed they were real. Pip, however, was very real, and as she was about to discover, very difficult to manage. Pip's first act of mischief was a harmless, yet annoying, prank. He made the town baker's bread loaves dance out of his bakery, forming a parade down the main street. The baker, old Mr. Gable, was left chasing his baked goods, which sang off-key nursery rhymes as they went. The villagers, seeing the trail of chaos leading to Clara's house, started to look at her with suspicion, their faces a mixture of confusion and disapproval. The joyous memory of her grandmother's stories was slowly being replaced by a sense of foreboding. Clara quickly realized the book's power was both a gift and a curse. She needed to learn to control it. She tried writing a simple command, "Pip, stop being mischievous." But as she wrote the words, the book twisted them. The line became, "Pip, start being more mischievous." Suddenly, a loud, booming sound shook the village. The village water well, their only source of fresh water, had turned into a fountain of thick strawberry soda. The children were delighted, but the adults were furious. The streets became sticky, attracting a swarm of buzzing insects, and the villagers were forced to ration their stored water. They gathered outside Clara's house, their voices filled with anger. "What are you doing, Clara?" one old man yelled. "Your grandmother's magic was a blessing. Yours is a curse." Their trust in her was gone. Clara, heartbroken and scared, went back to her room. She looked at the book, her heart heavy with the weight of the villagers' anger and her own helplessness. The magic, which had been a source of such joy, had become a source of fear and chaos. In the coming days, the mischief only escalated. Pip, giggling uncontrollably, made the scarecrows in the fields perform a frantic can-can dance, terrifying the local crows. He made the church bells ring at midnight, waking everyone from their sleep. Each prank, born from Clara's desperate and confused attempts to control him, only made the villagers more angry and isolated Clara further. She felt as though she had been cast out, losing not only her grandmother but the entire community she had grown up in. The sadness that had been a quiet ache in her heart now became a sharp, unbearable pain. She locked herself in her room, a prisoner of the magic she could not control, her tears staining the blank pages of the book. Pip, oblivious to the trouble he was causing, merely flickered in the shadows. He did not understand the difference between good and bad mischief. He was a sprite of stories, and his only purpose was to fulfill the words written in the book. The chaos escalated. One evening Pip, under the influence of Clara's frantic, desperate scribbles, brought a terrible magical storm upon Havenwood. The sky turned a sickly green, and bolts of lightning, shaped like mythical creatures, tore through the air. The winds howled, shaking the houses to their very foundations. People were huddled in their homes, terrified. The storm was not natural. It was a manifestation of Pip's uncontrolled power, a tempest born of confusion and fear. Clara felt a profound sense of helplessness. Her efforts to control Pip had only made him stronger and more chaotic. As the storm raged, a single, clear memory flashed in Clara's mind. It was her grandmother's voice, soft and steady, telling a story about the mischievous sprite, Pip. In that tale, Pip was a force of chaos, a storm of uncontrolled magic. The only way to tame him was not through commands or wishes, but through a story of a kind and brave hero who, through kindness and courage, taught the sprite the true meaning of magic. The story was not a command but a lesson, a moral compass for a being made of pure narrative. Clara's fear was replaced by a quiet determination. She opened the book, her hands no longer trembling. The empty page seemed to beckon her. The wind shrieked outside, and the ceiling fans swayed precariously. Clara closed her eyes, remembering her grandmother's words, her voice, her warmth. She took a deep breath and began to write. Her words were not commands or requests. They were a story. She wrote of a young girl, much like herself, who lived in a small, peaceful village. The girl's grandmother, the village's beloved storyteller, had a magic book. This book, like a mirror, reflected the heart of the writer. When the girl wrote with fear and anger, the book filled with chaos. But when she wrote with love and courage, the book became a source of great power. The girl in the story met a mischievous sprite, a being of pure mischief. He caused chaos and brought a storm upon the village. The girl, in her despair, did not fight him with more magic. Instead, she sat down and wrote a story. She wrote of a sprite who realized that his greatest power was not in causing chaos, but in bringing joy. She wrote of a sprite who helped a lost child find her way home, who brought rain to a dry field, who mended a broken heart with a story. She wrote of a sprite who, through kindness, became a hero. Clara's writing flowed effortlessly, a cascade of beautiful words. She felt her grandmother's presence in the room, a warm, comforting embrace. Her grandmother had not just told stories, she had lived them. The magic of her tales was not just in the words, but in the love and honesty she put into them. That was the secret of the book. It did not grant wishes. It reflected the heart of the writer. As Clara wrote the final words of her story, a brilliant golden light erupted from the book, shining brighter than any lightning bolt. The light engulfed Pip, who had been darting around the room in a frenzy. The light did not hurt him, it soothed him. It was as if the story was being woven into his very being, calming the storm of mischief that raged within him. His chaotic energy began to subside, his twinkling eyes softening with a newfound understanding. When the light faded, the storm outside had stopped. The wind died down to a gentle breeze, and the stars, which had been hidden for so long, peeked out from behind the clouds. Pip, now calm and serene, floated gently in front of Clara. He gave her a sweet smile, the mischief in his eyes replaced by a deep sense of gratitude. "Your story has the magic of your grandmother, Clara," he said, his voice now a gentle whisper. "You have not just written a tale, you have written my destiny." With those words, Pip gracefully flew back into the book. A moment later, the golden padlock reappeared, locking the book shut. The book was no longer just a source of power. It was a testament to Clara's courage and her grandmother's legacy. The next morning, the villagers, who had spent the night in terror, emerged to find the village bathed in a soft, golden light. The storm was gone, and the village felt more peaceful than it had in months. When they saw Clara, they no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with a deep sense of awe. She had not only saved the village from the storm but had brought back the peace they had lost. Clara, now the guardian of her grandmother's legacy, no longer feared her room. She now sat under the oak tree, the very same spot where her grandmother used to tell her stories. With the magical book in her lap, she began to write new tales, tales filled with the same love, honesty, and courage that she had found within herself. Every evening the villagers would gather to listen, their faces lit up by the gentle glow of the book. The magic had returned to Havenwood not through a grand, impossible wish, but through the simple act of a girl who found her voice and her destiny in her grandmother's stories. She had not just found a magical book, she had found herself,